Hi, we're starting to have a few people joining us. This is Miriam Glaze from Athlete Soul. I'm the founder of Athlete Soul. Welcome to our July 30th Feed the Soul event. We have a couple of people that have joined us. We're going to take a few more minutes to wait for the others to join. You guys are welcome to keep your video on or to turn it off. It's up to you. We're going to keep the video on, obviously, for all our panelists and the sound. If you could mute yourself while we're doing the first part of the event, the discussion, and then afterwards, we will let you turn your sound on if you have any questions. You can already put your question down in the chat if you would like to, as we go through the Q&A, or you can do it at the end when I'll turn it on to you. Deanna, do you want to start? I'll pass it on to you, then Margaux, and then Dominic and Taj, and then I'll finish up with myself. I'll let you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here today with everyone. And a little bit about myself. I'm a former college athlete who just loved athletics so much. I've just continued to find ways to keep that not only part of my life and my family, but also part of my career. And find myself today with a company called Athlete Network, which focuses on connecting employer partners with athletes who are career seeking and also athletes with their former schools and universities to continue to help them build their network and create value and opportunity all around. So excited to be here today and talk a little bit about what's going on in the market and how hopefully we can help those athletes in our lives.
Thank you, Deanna. Margaux, do you want to follow, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Margaux Lohry. I am the director of the Next Step program, which is a general management certificate program for elite athletes and military veterans put on by the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. I want to thank you, Miriam, for inviting me to take part today. I'm excited to be here to share my perspective on the athlete transition process. Before joining Tuck, I spent 10 years working with the national teams at US Rowing and USA Swimming. And myself, I was a collegiate rower for 4 years at Colgate University. So thrilled to take part and offer what I can to help.
Awesome. Thank you, Margaux. Dominic, your turn.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you. My name is Dominic Militello, the founder of 2 different companies right now, Job Search Gurus, which works with executives in career transition, and career coaching for athletes that focuses on the athletes in transition. I'm a former Division I college athlete and had a 4-year pro soccer career before Major League Soccer. 3 days after I retired, I got married into a family of 3 kids, a big house, and a dog named Rufus. It wasn't very long after that I went into kind of a real dark, deep place. Oprah Winfrey calls it the dark night of the soul. I spent way too much time there, but came out of it with a lot of different perspectives and some new insights, and now work with executives and athletes in career transition, looking at the job search process from a different perspective that has really generated a lot of tremendous results for my clients. So glad to be here and look forward to the conversation today.
Thanks, Dominic. Taj?
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Dashaun. I'm a former college football player at Stony Brook University. And classic athlete story, like many former athletes, when I went into the quote unquote real world, I really struggled to find my way, having no idea what I wanted to do. Started out in sales, eventually landed in recruiting, really started leaning into the process of helping people find their way because I knew what it was like to be lost. That eventually led to me branching out and forming my own company, ThriveAfterSports, which works with former athletes to help them find their next steps. I'm also the host of the ThriveAfterSports podcast, which is available on all platforms. Shameless plug right there. In addition to my own coaching platform, ThriveAfterSports, I'm also an athlete transition coach for Athlete Soul, reporting directly to the lovely Miriam Glaze. So happy to be here and share any knowledge and any wisdom that I can from my own experience. And hopefully we're able to help out some former athletes today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Taj. And thank you all of you guys for joining us and taking some time out of your day for doing this conversation. Really appreciate the fact that you guys are all former athletes working in different spaces in the sport industry, all with athletes. So from the education side to networking and corporate side, as well as the coaching and executive coaching. So I think we're going to have some great perspective from all of you. And I guess I'm going to start with my first question. And as I do that, maybe you guys can do a little rotation on who goes first for this one. But basically, you know, with everything that's going on right now with the economy, the pandemic, the market, I just want to start with your read on how is the job market, and how you feel about the environment now when athletes are job searching. So any one of you want to get started with that little introduction?
I'll start out.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was just so I don't want to downplay anything that's going on in the world right now. Obviously, there are a lot of people in tough spots. At the same time, as cliche as it may sound, I think it's really important to stay optimistic during these times. Despite what the numbers are, despite what the statistics are, I think as long as you're doing what you need to do to put yourself in a good position, I honestly think you're going to be all right. And I think it's important to use this time, especially for former athletes. You know, I'm working with people who are recently graduated. We're talking 22, 23 years old up until late 20s, early 30s, because we both know the transition isn't something that just, you know, happens overnight or you get through it overnight. It can be a long process. But I think it's important to use this time to stay in a place of discovery, meaning using it to figure out exactly what it is that you want to do. I think a lot of former athletes, once we're done playing, we're so desperate to kind of grab onto something to establish a new identity. I know that was the case with myself. I was just like, all right, I got a job. I'm adulting now. You know what I mean? I have a business card. I made it. And I think it's important to use this time, since we both know, or all of us know, it's going to take a little while to kind of land yourself somewhere, to be intentional about what it is that you're looking for and make sure that you're using it the right way. I think, once again, not to be insensitive about what's happening in the world right now, but I think you have to use this time efficiently to capitalize on that, and then also make sure that you're doing what you can do, because I think sending your resume off these days is not really enough, especially if there's limited opportunities. I think to stand out, whether that's putting out content. I encourage athletes to write articles. If you want to get into a certain industry, put out an article on LinkedIn, or, you know, create a blog, or put out videos, or put out information that is relevant to that a piece of paper that you're sending in. I know a guy, he had his internships canceled. He wanted to get into the sports broadcasting industry. I'll just use this as a great example. And both of his internships were canceled because of COVID, obviously. So what he did, as someone who wants to get into a sports broadcasting industry, he started a podcast, and he's interviewing former athletes. And obviously that's a great look. Once the dust kind of settles and opportunities pop up, he'll be able to say, hey, I have this podcast where, you know, I took initiative and started being a sports broadcaster from the comfort of my own home. So I just wanted to share that.
Fantastic. And I know I really insisted on going about this being an opportunity, depending on where we look at it and how we approach the market. I know, Dominic, you're big on that as well. So perhaps we can get a comment from you on your read on things at the moment. Dominic, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, the connection just dropped for a second from on my end, so I apologize. But I was gonna add on to what Taj was saying, is that I think employers are gonna ask job seekers, what did they do during this pandemic? What did they do during the downtime? So I'm suggesting to all of my clients that they're getting certifications in certain areas. If they're in the IT, get a certification. If they're, you know, whatever field you are, look for ways that you can improve your education online. Be able to tell your new and potential new employer that you spent the time wisely to improve yourself, which is going to benefit whoever is lucky enough to have you when you come on board. So that's just really what I like to add on that, is make sure you're using this time wisely and to educate yourself and improve your resume with your credentials.
Perfect. And perhaps that's something you want to comment on, Margaux? He stole your line there.
I think it's a great point. Of course, from the education perspective, there's a lot of opportunity right now, but I think another opportunity that the situation presents is to do volunteer work, or really to do things that you otherwise may not have the bandwidth, whether that's time or the financial ability to do right now while sports season are canceled. So what that means for athletes is that they can't participate. How are you going to pivot and use that time to do something that may not have been available to you, or might not be when you have a full-time job or when you are competing? And I think gaining relevant experience through a volunteer engagement is another really great way to kind of squeeze value out of a downtime.
Yeah, and I think you guys you summed it up pretty well on all of the different things that can be done to really differentiate yourself from the rest of the pack, basically. And I think athletes who are used to taking the lead and being proactive, they sort of know how to do that. You just need to apply that into the professional side. Deanna, with the Athlete Network, you work a lot with the corporation and companies that are hiring athletes. So what's your read on where we're at right now? Who is hiring? What are the other companies doing as well?
Sure. I think, as was mentioned earlier, it's easy to focus on the fact that these have been difficult times, but what we've actually learned is there are some employers who've actually thrived during this time period. And so there are people out there still hiring. And I think that's an important message for us to get in front of our athletes, because it can be discouraging to think that everyone, may not be looking for new talent right now. So we know specifically that medical has fared very well through this period. There are a lot of research and trials. There's a lot happening in that industry, of course, given that this is a health crisis. But in addition to that, we're seeing huge growth in tech with the move of everybody to remote in a lot of places, either for shortened or extended periods of time. Think about Zoom, even that we're on today, and the kind of growth they've experienced through additional use and the ability to reach into new markets while we're here. So those two industries in particular, along with insurance and benefits, have really fared pretty well during this time. And, I've talked with a lot of athletes, as well as with our recruiters we work with in those industries, who said, there's often kind of cast this judgment about certain types of employers. When I say insurance, people don't always get very excited about that industry. But what's really interesting is they offer management training programs that really give people the ability to come in and learn business, not just insurance, but sales and marketing and all the pieces that go into that. So when you think about that industry growing and the opportunity that you have to learn the breadth of how a business works, it's really a very attractive option for a lot of recent grads or people who are transitioning out of that first career right out of college to really get more exposure and more experience that they can leverage. On the flip side, there have been some industries that aren't in a growth phase right now. When we look at things like retail, in some cases, as well as travel and leisure, it's been a much more difficult road for them. Companies like Enterprise, for example, haven't been renting a lot of cars. There hasn't been a significant amount of travel in the earlier part of the year. Those employers are more looking to pipeline and network, to get to know athletes, to get to know people who might be a good fit when they go back into a hiring phase. And we are starting to see some of that pick back up. People are starting to reacquire people that maybe were furloughed and starting to look at recruiting and hiring again. So certainly industries that will rebound, that's a huge part of our culture and our DNA. So we believe they will be actively hiring, if they're not today, again, very soon. But even now, they want to get to know people. No one wants to wait until they need to hire someone to start talking to those people. So it's a great time just to be in front of them. If people have a specific career path or a specific industry that they want to work in, I would really encourage them to reach out now. And if the answer is we're not actively hiring, then their answer can be, it's great to get to know more about your company, either for myself or people I may know who may be interested. And I'd love to stay in touch with you. And that's a great message our employer partners are sending right now.
I think it's very interesting what you said about the different industries that are hiring, because you're right. You may think about insurance and just working in the core of that business, but the reality is they still need IT people, they still need marketing, they still need sales. And so these industries that are doing well, you can still find a job that may not necessarily be related to tech or be related to insurance within an industry that's thriving. So let's not be too negative, because there are a lot of things that you can find in those. I think that's great. I want to move on a little bit to Dominic, because he's got a specific process of helping athlete and executive through the job searching, and especially in the preparation. So I'd love to hear your take on that. But also related to what Deanna said is, you want to be in front of people, you want to keep your name out there, and you want to be able to sustain that. And I think that's where also some of the difference is going to be. So love to hear what your take on this is.
Well, no, I think it correlates just perfectly. What I'm suggesting to my clients is, before they even engage within the marketplace, they have to have a mindset that equates to that. And so one of the things that I want my clients to understand is that this is not necessarily a job seeker to an employer process. This is a brand to brand process. Just like Nike, Under Armour, all these brands out there, when they partner with other brands, it's a brand to brand process to help increase the value of each other's brands. So I want my clients to understand you are the CEO of your own personal brand. Everything you think, say, and do is either going to increase, keep it the same, or decrease the value of your brand. So when you go into the job market with that mindset, that you bring some value to the table, and that by partnering or working with another brand, that partnership has got to increase the value of each other's brands. If it's not going to increase the personal value of your brand, it's not going to work. Just like any relationship, just like any marriage. So what I'm asking my clients to do is understand that first. Understand that you're the CEO of your brand. And when you go into the marketplace, understand what that relationship looks like as you're networking effectively with other great brands out there. One of the things that I want my clients to understand is that they bring value to the table. But what is their real value, and how do you share that value with somebody else, right? Most 25-year senior executives I work with don't really understand, even know what their real value is. And so we put them through a series of exercises to help them understand what their value is. And let me give you a quick example of what that might look like. Most of us have been through some trials and tribulations to get to where we're at today. Well, what makes you different from somebody who has similar background, similar education, similar experiences is how you've gotten through some of those trials and tribulations. So we use an acronym called PAR, Problem, Action, Result. We've all been faced with very, very big challenges and problems. What differentiates us from everybody else is how we came to the solution to solve the problem. And then the result of the problem is what your real value equates to. So when you're talking to somebody and they're saying, well, Dominic, why should I hire you for this position? I'm going to say, well, I'm not just going to say, well, I'm going to come in early, stay late. That's what everybody says. But maybe say something like, hey, listen, let me give you an example of why I think you should hire me over them. Well, when I was at XYZ company, I was faced with this really big problem. Here's what I did to solve it. And here was the result of that action that I took. Now, most people say, well, Dominic, I wasn't by myself in that situation. I had other people. Yes, but they're not hiring the other people. They're hiring you. So emphasize what you did specifically to solve the problem and get the result. And in just kind of finishing up on this thought, the result, I want my clients to try to equate that to some sort of economic value. How did you increase revenue? Did you increase productivity? Did you decrease cost to get that in that result, right? Now, some people might say, well, Dominic, I'm just a first-year college graduate. I don't really have those kind of results. What do I do? Well, maybe you were the captain of the team. Maybe you didn't get along with teammates. Maybe you didn't get along with your coach. Maybe you didn't get along with the athletic director, whatever. How did you overcome that? How did you communicate that? That's what companies are looking for, those leadership skills, the communication skills, the accountability skills, right? And so if I get my clients, my young clients, to start thinking like they're the CEO of their own brand, when they go out and network and look for opportunities, they're not just job seeking, they're looking for the right opportunity for both sides of the table. And I think there's a lot more options when you have that mindset than just trying to find a job that's out there in the marketplace.
I love that message, because a lot of the time, you hear you need to be prepared for the interview, you need to do a lot of research on the company, but I think there's also a fair amount of reflection on yourself to be able to have the right example and use what you've had in terms of your athletic career, because we're talking about athletes here, what can you use, clear example, practical example that you had from your teamwork, from your relationship, from learning new skills, from traveling, from adjusting to different situations? What can you use from that would make you stand out from the rest of the applicants? And I think that is really good that we get started with that reflection. And we're gonna pass it on to Taj, because I think he's got some comment to that topic as well. I know that you talked before about the trials and error and the exploration time that we have after college, and perhaps sometimes the straight path that we take to find what we want to do after college, right? So can you talk a little bit about your perspective on that too?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important to do whatever it is that you have to do until you can do what you want to do. So as far as the self-reflection piece, excuse me, I got some construction going over here, guys. As far as the self-reflection piece, I think the main thing there is to really dig deep and start to think about the type of lifestyle that you want. You know what I mean? Because what was really my challenge when I graduated was not having any sort of reflection. I was so caught up in chasing money, right? And I think it's really important to make sure that you're doing things for the right reason and actually thinking long term. Like, it's okay to get a job to make money. I encourage this all the time, but whenever I'm working with someone, I'm making sure that we're working long term on the bigger picture. So if you're in a job, there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't get stuck there. Make sure, I call it keeping your antennas up. Make sure that whatever you're doing, you're keeping your antennas up and thinking long term. You know, look at your managers, think to yourself, or your boss or your supervisors, do I want to be in their shoes 5 to 10 years from now? And if not, I'm not telling you to just up and quit your job today. You know, I'm saying that you want to look at that and try to find people who you can model. I'm really big on finding people that you can look up to as role models and actually establishing relationships with these people. So, and I know Deanna may have touched on this earlier, as far as just saying, hey, I wanted to reach out just to build a relationship, even if you're not hiring right now. Another thing that I really think is important is to kind of draft mentors into your life, right? Because, I mean, any great team drafts mentors. Even on the collegiate level, recruiting is drafting, essentially. So I look at it as, in your everyday life, now that you're out in the real world trying to find your way, why would you not implement a process of drafting people onto your team, whether this is peers, whether this is people who can guide you and help you get where you want to go? And I'm really big on setting up interviews, right? Informational interviews. I think that's a term that kind of gets thrown around a lot. We've all heard it before, you know, set up informational interviews. But I don't think a lot of us do a good job of executing on that. I know I certainly did it, which is why I'm so heavy on encouraging that now, to reach out to people and say, hey, I know I see you're in this position. You're at this company. You're doing X, Y, Z. I'm a former athlete. I'm interested in going down this path. Would you be willing to spend some time talking to me about how you got to where you got to? Would you mind sharing your story with me? I'm looking to follow in your footsteps. I mean, we all know people love talking about themselves, right? So if you reach out to someone and say, hey, can I send you my resume, or can you help me get a job? They're not too likely to respond to you, versus if you say, I'm interested in what you do. I want to be in your shoes. Will you speak? Can you? I've seen it happen. And I think those connections end up being the people who ultimately get you a foot in the door anyway, because you've expressed interest, they take a liking to you, they take you under their wing. And, you know, from there, a lot of good things could happen. So that's some things that I would recommend to any former athletes right now trying to find their way.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and we'll touch base a little bit more on the networking towards the end. But I wanted to sort of have Margaux's perspective on what you guys have just talked about, and basically ask you what you think. And you see a lot of athletes through the program. You also see some military veterans through your program, but quite high level athletes. And so I'm curious what you think their specific attributes are. What can they put to the forefront to differentiate themselves from other candidates perhaps on the job market?
Absolutely. Before I address that, I wanted to say that I really love the first point that Taj made about it's okay that if what you're doing isn't perfect, to have a job just to have a job. And to double down on that, if I could have a t-shirt made of John Wooden's quote, "Things turn out the best for those who make the best out of how things turn out," I would. I'm sure it is a t-shirt. Let's all go buy one of those t-shirts, because I think it really speaks to an empowering mindset that allows any job seeker, but athletes in particular, to get out of the trap of viewing success as binary. So it's not like I got my dream job or I failed. It's I got a job. How can I cultivate this experience to derive the value out of it that I really want to? I think it's an empowering mindset to keep in mind for any job seeker. So that's my plug for John Wooden and his little famous quotes. But to actually answer your question, Miriam, I think that athletes, it's easy to kind of fall into like, oh, I have a non-traditional background, this is a hindrance for me. When in fact, I think there are a lot of ways that athletes can play up the unique aspects of their experience that give them a leg up in the job market, and especially in today's working climate. Three come to mind for me right away. The first is that athletes are really great at creating short, medium, and long-term plans and managing them at the same time. Think about like this week's training schedule, this season's competition schedule, and then like if you're, an Olympic or national team level athlete, this quadrenniums or this, set of few years, that overarching plan. It's really difficult to manage multiple time horizons at the same time. And that's valuable to employers because it shows them that you can prioritize and make sense of complex information and put it into action, kind of watch different things at the same time. You also know how to visualize different outcomes and plan for contingencies. So like, what happens if I get injured, or what happens if I don't make the team, or what happens if we do or don't make the playoffs? That's really valuable. The second that comes to mind is that athletes know how to be productive in unstructured and unconventional environments. So just thinking back on, the experience that all of us panelists had as collegiate athletes, we are traveling, we're sitting on the sidelines of the field, we're on the pool deck, we're studying, we are looking up internship opportunities, we're able to keep our eye on different objectives at the same time in environments that are really distracting. So I'll tell you what, my house is really distracting. I have a husband at home, I have a toddler at home, I'm trying to work at the same time. That's difficult for people who are only used to doing that in like a corporate office or in a cubicle. But athletes know how to tune things out and kind of turn down the volume on what's going on behind them and really focus in on what's important, the task at hand. And the third thing I'll mention is that, it's just kind of obvious, but I think it's overlooked sometimes. Athletes are super coachable. And that's something that you don't find in every employee. Somebody can be really talented or have a super impressive history, work history, but unless they're coachable, a company can't get all the value out of them that they want. So the fact that as an athlete, you're used to taking direction and being flexible, making adjustments, it means that the effort that company who hires you puts into developing you and molding you, that you're going to be receptive to those efforts. So I think it's important for athletes to play that up as well, because it shows that the company's investment in them as an employee is going to pay off.
I think that's a huge point that you're making right there, because I think the return on investment for hiring is huge. And we talked about it a little bit. The process for hiring is a long-winded process. It's usually pretty expensive. You have a lot of different people involved, and being able to bet on the person that will be able to learn and grow and develop perhaps into higher position and stay with the company through that process of learning, I think is really important. And that's something that athletes can definitely highlight through their interview process for sure. I also really like that you insisted on focusing on the process of developing a professional career. Obviously, a lot of athletes have a problem of being, it's not necessarily just a problem, but being really perfectionist and want to have 100% success on everything that they do. And so we know that in sport, you have to focus on the journey and the development, and trust that the outcome will be what you want once you've done the right process and the right work. And it's actually the same in a professional career. You can't land your dream job out of college straight away and be in love in that. It's still a process. I really like that you you outline that, because I think it's really important, and it's often too forgotten. There's no shortcut, and you can't be successful right out of the bat. So I think that was a really good point. You mentioned the skills that athletes have that actually relate to the virtual working, which is a huge positive right now. So I wanted to touch base a little bit on that and have all of your perspective on it. I think it's here to stay. We're gonna see way more company, of course, in the next year or 2 years, but perhaps even after that. There will be more education online, virtual working. I think people's the mindset is much more flexible now, and we've proven that it's possible. So just curious what you guys think about it, and how do you perhaps see this as an opportunity for those that are looking for work right now? Who wants to get started? Deanna, do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to. It is a unique opportunity. I think a lot of people, were doing some hiring in virtual settings. They were willing to have sales reps who were regionally located, or they were looking for, HR for different offices across the country, or whatever those positions might be. And now almost every position has really morphed into more of a virtual type role. The opportunity for career seekers is that they may be able to go after positions they couldn't have before. They may not have been willing to relocate to the Northeast, but they may be willing to take a virtual position with a company based somewhere else from where they're currently living. So I think it broadens what people can do. I think it opens up additional positions for them to look at and potentially pursue. The great part of it too is that a lot of athletes have already proven that, as Margaux was mentioning and others as well, that they're capable of working in different circumstances, that they can have focus when others might struggle. And so I think it's a great time to lean into those qualities and really play those up when they're interviewing, when they're talking with people about how they're going to be successful in a remote environment. Most people that show up to the interviews might have the right skills or experience or competencies for the job. I think that extra X factor right now is going to be, how are you going to do all of that, but do it without being in the office or without being virtual or present with everyone else that you're working with. So great opportunity to use that experience, as Dominic said earlier, to really to your advantage, to be able to let people know why you are going to be successful as opposed to others they might be talking to.
Yeah, and perhaps it's also an opportunity for athletes to get started on jobs when they're still competing or in their career, even if it's a part-time solution that eventually will lead to a full-time role. So I think it brings a lot more flexibility than perhaps we've seen in the past, especially for athletes, and it's really needed for them. Dominic, Taj, do you guys have any further comment on virtual working?
Yeah, I was just going to say too, as athletes, from the time I was little till the time I was in the pros, my teammates came from all over the world. So we had an opportunity to interact with a lot of different people from a lot of different places. And so, working from remote, maybe you don't have that interaction, but you can demonstrate to your employer that, listen, whatever the business is, I can interact and relate to a lot of different types of people from a lot of different places. And with obviously working for remote, that's probably what you're going to be doing. The other thing is athletes tend to bring a lot of passion to whatever they're doing. And so I know one thing that I consult with myself too, is that I have to be careful of my passion. It can sometimes be a little bit overbearing. And a lot of athletes have that, where they have to maybe work within that environment. Maybe they may not have to be as aware of that working for remote, because when you're in this kind of environment we're on now, you can kind of get a little bit more passion and a little bit more energetic, and it may not, rub people the wrong way inside the office. So I think there's a lot of positives right now for athletes, especially to working in this kind of environment. You see me, I'm using my hands. I just get excited and passionate about it, right? But in this kind of environment, it may be okay. It might be more of an asset than maybe inside the office, where if you're running around, doing as we do as athletes, want to get to know everybody and get everybody ramped up and let's go get them kind of thing. This may be actually better suited for athletes in this time and age that we find ourselves in. So
such a great point. I've spoken to a lot of athletes and interviewed a lot of former athletes who've all sort of shared their feeling of inadequacy in the office in the early stages of retirement, because they felt they had too much energy, they were too enthusiastic, they were sort of perhaps too straightforward or too much in the face sometimes of their bosses or colleagues. And so I think you're definitely onto something here where maybe there's a little bit more focus on the outcome. And so because there's no so much time with people to people contact, I think it's a great opportunity for athletes to be enthusiastic but not overly. What do you think, Tash? You were going to add something to that.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely had that experience in the workplace. Another thing that I think is sometimes not only can we be too much, like Dominic said. I mean, that's all a matter of perspective. Other people may see us in the workplace as being too much when in reality we're athletes, so we're just go-getters. But another thing I ran into is not that I was too much, but the environment was a drag. Meaning, like, if you're the only athlete in your workplace and you're like, all right, let's go, let's hit these goals. I'm coming in, I'm at work early, I'm ready to, knock it out the park. And everyone else is just kind of like dragging in. And, sometimes the work environments can be kind of depressing if we're being real about it. You're under fluorescent lights and, people don't really want to be there. People may not be as dedicated to actually doing the job as you are. So I think that when you're in that kind of bubble, as we are now, you're able to just go in internally and focus in on what, makes you a competitor, competing with the person in the mirror so that you can handle whatever responsibilities you may have. Like me, I'm more of an introverted type of guy. So I love being alone. Like, I'm sitting at home all day running my business, doing phone calls versus being in an office and people are asking me, did I see the game last night? Or I got phones going off, printers, and people to the left and right of me. I think and a lot of people I do realize have trouble being alone. They kind of need that team environment. But once again, looking at the silver lining, this is a time for you to practice being in that solitude, being alone, and learn how to focus and get things done behind closed doors, because we don't really have a choice right now. So it's a great time to hone that skill.
Yeah. Margaux, do you want to add something to this and perhaps touch on the virtual education as well, or how, if you see this affecting athletes in any way?
Sure. I think any time, in any person's career when they're making a change, and especially now when the job market is being affected in ways that we can't, that are both unprecedented and difficult to predict, there's a reflex in those situations to help, kind of steady yourself and fill gaps through reaching for education, which I think is a great instinct. It's one that's really drilled into us. I can say, as Americans or North Americans or Europeans, especially, I want to suggest that everyone consider that really thoroughly before taking a leap that's, time consuming or really expensive, because the beauty of the way that, education has evolved in the last few years, and especially right now in this exact moment, is that there's this flood of virtual offerings through, top tier schools in the US, executive education platforms like Coursera and edX and LinkedIn Learning. There's just a wealth of riches out there in terms of ways that people can educate themselves virtually and at a comparatively lower cost and with lower investment than a traditional bachelor's degree or master's degree. And speaking from my own experience, when I had first started my career, and I really knew that working in sports was something I wanted to keep doing, and I got a master's degree in sports management, and it was a great experience. But as I think back on it, I wonder if it would have been smarter in terms of the time and financial investment to consider more discrete courses or pieces of education or content that I could have used to fill in very specific gaps. Because, and I work for a business school, so like it's weird for me to say this, but an MBA is not for everyone. If you want to have a career in business, you don't necessarily need an MBA. It's important first to do a low cost experiment. So try out a shorter course in business fundamentals and line that up with the things, skills and experiences you already have, and a job opportunity that represents something you're interested in, and look closely. Do you really need an MBA? Try to get hired first before you make a decision to spend 2 years and $150,000 on something like that. I think that's, a huge benefit of this online learning climate, is that those resources are much more accessible.
Well, and I think this, first of all, it's a very strong message coming from someone who is in education to actually really make you think twice about going and taking more classes. The other side of this is I think we're entering a space and an economy where you don't do just one thing. It seems that it's more of a complement of different things, whether you're doing some volunteer work, some internship, a part-time job, another part-time job, a little bit of education. And it seems that athletes perhaps are best suited in picking a few things that they can that can help them build their experience, their resume, and get them a foot in the door in some industries that they want to get into. So it seems that the answer is not as straightforward as perhaps what we have seen in the past with, you know, your college degree and then a job, and that's sort of all you do. I think things are a little bit more in the gray area now. And something you touched on, Taj, yesterday when we were discussing, and I really like that of saying, you know, you can go sideways doors to enter an industry or profession that's more towards your dream job. So I really like that message. I think it's really interesting. Before we open up to questions from our participant, wanted to ask you guys for one more recommendation that you have, or a note on networking, anything else you want to add. We'll follow our order. Taj, you want to get started?
Yeah, I think my parting advice would really be to get creative and think outside of the box. And what I mean by that is being a self-starter, like all athletes are, and really use this time to put things out into the world. And it's whatever you're comfortable with. You know, I like to do videos. I have a podcast, obviously, but maybe you enjoy writing. Maybe you're not comfortable on camera. Maybe you want to just put something out there. Like, I think that's the best thing you can do rather than sitting idly. And don't be, like Miriam was just saying, don't be ashamed to take a job that's kind of unrelated while you're looking for the thing that is really going to have you excited. Like, I'm working a part-time job right now. Yesterday, I was on the call with everybody and I was at work, you know, and today I'm spending time working on my business. But there's nothing wrong with doing that. You don't have to feel like, oh, I have to get this internship or it has to be related to what I want to do. Just do what you have to do to make sure your bills are paid, and spend your free time not watching Netflix, you know, not lounging around the house, but spend that free time putting in work. And I'm kind of preaching to the choir because I know athletes don't have a problem with putting in hard work. So that's my parting words.
Dominic, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I love the whole discussion here, of course, and it's so relevant. I'm just thinking back. I have just six quick things I'd like to share with the audience that I think will help. I wish I had this back when I was going through this and had no idea what a resume was or what networking meant or any of that. Here's what I would suggest. First, understand you first. Understand, maybe instead of starting this process with a resume, start with a job offer. What does that dream job offer look like? And then let's go figure out what the steps are to get there, right? And learn as you go. Maybe the job that you're in right now isn't the ideal job, but there's something there that you can learn to take with you on your journey towards your dream job. So I would understand. So first thing is just research yourself first. Research the job search model, because there's so much there that you can carry with you as you go forward. Maybe create a website. Just use like a Wix or some free website portal that you can create 2 or 3 pages that can demonstrate and show your personality, your creativity. Put some quotes on there that from coaches, mentors, teachers that say, let them say how cool you are. Fourth, maybe know your value. Talk about some of these problems you've experienced and how you got through them and what the results were. Employers are always looking for results: productivity, increasing sales, decreasing costs. Finally, the last 2 things, maybe network effectively. Taj mentioned this earlier. Don't just go in about a job. Try to get to know the person that you want to work for or going to go to work for. Find out what their beliefs are. Try to find some commonalities. Try to do those informational interviews and connect heart to heart, and then maybe talk about the opportunities. And finally, get some help. Get a coach. Get a mentor. Get with somebody that has been through it, that can guide you on this journey, so you're not spending time like in the dark night of the soul like I did for so many years, where I was just struggling, trying to figure it out. Fortunately, it worked out, but you don't have to spend so much time there. You can spend time creating the plan and then executing on that game plan. So that's what I would say to anybody who's kind of just starting out on the journey, and to be effective in the process. So.
Yeah, I think that's great. Nice sharing those 6 steps. I love it. Deanna, do you want to add a little bit? And perhaps there's something also towards those who work with athletes and not necessarily just the athletes themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I love where Dominic just ended, which is, understanding your network, your connectivity. What sticks with me so much is we're all already part of a team. Being an athlete gives you this built-in community. And I don't think we use it enough every day. We don't think about former teammates. We don't think about coaches as references or people who understand our character and our work ethic and really use that to our advantage. And so really leverage your community. We use the word networking a lot. I like the word community because we all belong there because we have a thread that connects us. So when we work with athletes, we really have them look at several things. One is other athletes, teammates, people you've been connected with. The other is your school itself. Do you have coaches? Do you have mentors? Are there fellow alumni athletes from your school who are in an area you want to be in? If you've got someone who's in medical device sales and that's your dream job, as we've talked about, then reach out to them, not to give you a job, but to learn about their path and how they got there and what they would recommend. Is there schooling? Is there certifications? Is there experience you need to be successful? And really think of them as part of your community as well. I can't think of anything I'd rather do than be able to help somebody who's coming up the same path that I've come up as well. And as that school or that university, find ways to create those connections. It can't just be about the university and the alumni or the current student athlete. It's got to be about all of them and how you get them in touch with each other. When you're coaching on the sideline or on the bench or giving instructions, but ultimately the people on the court or the field or in the water are the people that actually have to execute. And so the school to me is a conduit to help those people make those connections, help them find each other, and then let them help each other be successful. And that would be my advice for, anyone who's working with coaching, mentoring, or trying to help career seeking athletes is to, put them in touch with other people who've been there and done that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you're bringing all these examples because we've received a lot of internship requests this summer from athletes that had lost their internship. And it's been fantastic to have all these athletes work with us. Most of them are still in their season or starting their season again. So they're going back to sport, and the flexibility of doing a remote work internship has been fantastic. I think they're able to be student as well as doing their sport and the internship. So great opportunities and a good way for them to get started, access a network, be connected with others. Margaux, do you have anything you want to add before we move to the rest of the audience?
Sure, I'll briefly just offer a different perspective on networking. It's one that I take comfort in and hold closely because I'm, like Taj, an introvert as well, and just the idea of gathering up business cards and glad handing people and asking them for stuff really makes my skin crawl. I really look at networking as giving people things, offering my support to others. It's kind of like gardening, which when you get to be an old lady like me, your interest turn into gardening and you spend time planting stuff, but you have to plant things up front, and then eventually after you take really good care of them, a flower might come out. It's really about that upfront offer of support to others more than an upfront request. And it takes a long time. It takes patience. I have, people that are, professional connections of mine that I've known for 15, 20 years. And I've been there with them along the way, staying in touch, trying to offer them my support however I could when it was relevant. And eventually maybe they can offer me something. But I just want to say that it's more about offering support than receiving support, and you have to have patience that in the long run, those relationships will bear fruit.
Absolutely, and it's a great way to circle back to what Deanna was saying at the beginning of our call when she was talking about still being in discussion with employers and companies, even though they're not necessarily hiring, but you want to sustain those relationships in the long run because perhaps in 6 months or even further down the road, they will be beneficial to you. So staying in touch with not only with your network, but also with the people that you've connected with through job searching. I want to move into Q&As from our participants. So if you guys that have joined us today want to ask any question to our guests, please feel free to do that. You can just turn off your mute and ask your question directly. Otherwise, you can type it into the chat box if you want, and I can ask it for you. So we'll wait a few minutes, see if anybody has any question or anything to add. In the meantime, I wanted to repeat what I said at the beginning of the call, where obviously this event was being recorded and it will be available on our website. So if you work with athletes and want to share this call with them, you'll be able to do that. I will be sharing with all our participants the recording following the call, as well as information on all 4 of our guests and their company and the program that they work with, so that you can share that with your athletes as well. Any questions? Not at this point. Guys, do you have any other specifics you want to add? Anything we haven't touched on?
I'll mention one thing that Taj, something you said earlier made me think of. You were talking about how the kind of work environment can be a drag for athletes because comparatively it's not as fast paced, it's kind of boring sometimes. What I've found to be helpful, just for me personally, is when I've looked for job opportunities, I really consider the mission of the company and the extent to which the company really is driven by it. Because it's really easy to have like a mission statement up on the wall, every company does, but like find out, by asking people who work there and asking leadership, or whoever is interviewing you, how does that mission really impact the day-to-day work? And is there an obvious connection? And the reason I think this is, key for athletes is because if you think about what is being on a team, that is the ultimate mission. It's also a very clear and obvious mission, winning, success. And I think that's what we find so motivating. Personally, having started my career working for 2 national sports teams, again, it's like a very clear mission and identity to be a part of, which is really inspiring. And that's one of the reasons I love working at Tuck, because we have a very clear mission and it's truly carried out by every person in the organization, in everything we do every day at all levels. And that connection is not always, it's not easy to make, and it's not present in all companies. So I would suggest that athletes really focus on that when they're evaluating fit between themselves and a prospective company.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because if you've done the work on your reflection and the preparation before doing the job searching, it's really important that you try to look into companies that you can align with. There's no point in if you know what you want, it's easier to be able to align it and stay in that job rather than trying different companies one by one. So I think that's a really important point. I'm going to give a really quick recap of some of the things that you guys brought up today, because I thought that was awesome. We touched a little bit on the mindset of job searching, what value you can bring as an athlete to a company, what life you want, what type of job, the fact that you won't necessarily find the perfect job straight away, what can you do to differentiate yourself, thinking about role models and mentors within your network and growing your network and using those mentors as well to grow your network. And I love the expression from Taj, drafting people on your team. I definitely will reuse that and take it from you. It was awesome. And we talked about focusing on the process of developing your career and not being 100% perfect from the get-go, and definitely being creative in how you can differentiate yourself and how you can develop your brand that will then be talking to other brands out there, and how you can bring value to them. So I thought that was a really fantastic conversation. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to be on the call. Thank you to our participant. I will be sharing obviously the recording of this event, as well as more information from all of your organization and companies. I also encourage anyone on the call, if you have, or if you are looking, or if you have athletes that are looking for former athletes or contact within different industries, Athletes Hall has a pretty good network of former athletes. So happy to put anybody in touch with people within the industry. The Athlete Network obviously has millions of athletes on there as well. So feel free to reach out to all of us if you need anything and need any further assistance for athletes out there. I think I speak for all of you guys, right, that we're all former athletes and know how difficult the transition can be. So feel free to reach out. And thank you again. Thank you to all of you. Appreciate it, your time, and you guys all have a great day.
Thanks, Miriam.
Thank
Miriam.
you.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks for having us, Miriam.
All right.
Great job,
you.
everybody. That was awesome.
Thanks. See ya. Bye.